One second. We're now recording, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. So I'm doing a session on teaching A-level ancient history in a fully comprehensive setting. So just a little bit of an introduction to myself and where I teach to give you a bit of context to this. So my name's Emma Beetham. I've taught in FE since 2005. I'm the course leader for ancient history. And at York College, we do recruit from a large catchment area. So we've got a large amount of students that come in from a different background, from state schools. I've had some from private schools. So we've got kind of a mixed bag of students. So currently the entry grades to get into our college to do A-levels as a programme of study is 4 grade 5s at GCSE and a minimum of a grade 4 in English language. So if they've met that criteria, they can do a programme of A-levels. Currently, we are switching over in September to doing linear. So we enter them, this is the last year for entering them for the AS exam. So they go, currently this current year had done 4 ASs, and then they were making the choice once they get the grades, which 3 full A-levels they want to do from September. That's changing from September, so they will be starting on 3 A-levels. As far as I'm aware, our entry grades are staying the same. So we'll, that'll be seeing what the results are next year. So in order to do history at York College, we do 3 different histories: ancient history, early modern, and modern. They need at least a grade 5 in English language, RS, or history if they've taken it. So we don't have it as a prerequisite that they have to have done history at GCSE to do history A-level, just due to smaller schools and, obviously block timetables and things like that. So that's a bit of context to the type of students that we get at the college. So last year, our enrolments for ancient history actually surpassed the modern history enrolment. So at AS last year, I had 91 people enroll onto the first year, which equated to 4 teaching groups. And then those that continued on with A-level ancient history, I had 44 students, which was 2 teaching groups. So total that were entered for the exam this year, which they've just all done, was 135 students in total at the college. There's me that teaches all the second year groups and 3 of the AS groups, and one other teacher that teaches 1 group of the current ASs. So that's just a kind of an idea of the amount of students that we've got and how our provision has to kind of cater between lower level students and obviously the high flyers as well. So I find that when I get students that come to do ancient history, we normally get the super keeners that are really, really into history, and potentially want to learn a different era of history, a different area, because they've done modern history and they want to do something a bit different, which is great for us because they're all super keen. Well, I'll say all, the vast majority are keen on the subject. They've done quite a lot of reading, or they've got an idea of what we're doing. They're into myths, mythology, gods, and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of level of student. Then we've got some students that kind of don't know anything and just heard about it, come to one of our open days or done a taster day and found that the course sounds really interesting. So one of the difficulties that I think I have, and I think maybe most teachers get when they're teaching A-level ancient history, is making the source material accessible for students that haven't studied any sort of ancient history or classics or any sort of source material that we need to deliver in the A-level. So one of the things that I do find is the different places, the names, working back in BC and thinking about the context of the evidence can be a little bit tricky for some of the students that have, are on the lower end of the grade profile. So what I try to do to make sure that students are all accessing the material correctly is I do a lot of focused reading. I also, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about these on my next few slides. So, reading with specific purpose for those that are finding the material a little bit more difficult to access some of the language, the vocabulary, then I'll give them specific tasks which are a little bit different to the rest of the group. I find colour coding, and we'll see again a bit later, quite useful for students that, you know, like to put things in kind of like different groups and when they're revising. A lot of quote banks that we've developed over the course as well. So they've got a kind of a go-to kind of bank of things that they can use. Lots of evaluation and summary table seems to work, especially when we get into the end of a topic area as well. They're the kind of key things that I try and do with the different sources. And some students find one area of doing this kind of looking at the material better than another. So I've got some students that really find kind of colour coding and thinking about different sections of the source easier to understand and then pick out the bits that they need. Others find doing quote banks a lot easier when it comes to doing past paper questions or looking at the material. So I give them all the kind of different ways of doing it. And then as we go through the course, after, you know, the first couple of months, after they've got kind of used to the sources, they kind of find their own way of which works best for their way of learning. So how I try to structure my lessons is I give kind of a little bit of a variety of things through talking, using PowerPoints. I use booklets, and I also give them reading to do during the lessons as well, and reading that I've set before the lesson that I've expected them to come and have done ready for starting off the lessons. So this is an example of some of the kind of directed reading, focused reading, something that when we're looking at, for example, Herodotus, when we're reading it for the Persian invasion, etc., some of the students find the kind of the style of Herodotus can be going a little bit difficult, or they're not understanding the words. So during my PowerPoints, I often give them some focused tasks on specific parts of the reading, and that ensures that the lower end students are getting out of the sources that what I want them to get. But at the same time, it allows the higher end students to pick out more information, develop it a little bit more, and making sure that they've got even more quotes for quote banks or for their colour coding, however which way. So where you can just see task that's in between some of the PowerPoint slides, specific questions, who were appointed, what were their orders. So it's very specific questions to make sure that it's basically comprehension, so the lower end students can get at least something from the sources. Also, I kind of mix things up and like to do some tasks involving group work as well. So group work would often, I usually put them into groups. Sometimes I let them choose their own depending on the tasks, but I try and mix my group abilities to make sure I've got some ones that are really grasping the sources, can really develop it, often speak out in class, can evaluate really well, with some of the students that are finding it a little bit tricky. So the ones that are finding it a little bit tricky can kind of get some ideas off those other students. This task worked really well. Took a little bit of time to set up, but in the long term, I think they got a lot from it. So these were a couple of the slides that I had ready. So they came into the classroom and I'd already been in there, and my tables had been arranged, so they were into groups, and I'd picked out specific extracts from the Herodotus sources that were expected to read, and kind of cut them up and snipped them so they were just in kind of big bits of paper, and stuffed them all in an envelope. I didn't give them any other instructions. There was no which section of the book it was from. There was no numbers on the book. And they were in this envelope and they had to empty them out. And these instructions were on the board, which I went through. And they had to read through the bits of evidence that were cut out and trying to work out from the source what event was Herodotus trying to describe, or what was it discussing? Try and arrange it so the bits of evidence were kind of put chronologically in order. And then I was give them poster paper and then glue sticks, etc. And they were then to try and present those different sheets of paper that I've been giving them in order, and try and work out the date, etc., etc. So they had to include a title. They had to remember some analysis and evaluation of Herodotus, so they could remember what makes that particular piece reliable, unreliable. Was there any, the usual thing? What is he saying? How is he presenting the Persians, or the Spartans, or whatever it might have been? They had to try if they could remember some clear dates and what event, and then annotation as well. So I asked them to kind of underline things and make some annotations. What does this mean? So at the end of it, each group had a piece of paper with different events on different papers, and then we could put them up on the board, and some people took some photos and then they could use it as a revision tool. I took some photos and posted it on their Teams group so they could see it and use it for a later date. But I found that really useful because it involved discussion, it involved trying to work things out, and the ones that were not quite sure what the source was talking about could actually discuss it with members of the group. Like I say, it did take a little bit of time to set up, but it was really useful for them to think about. And I have done it with other bits of evidence as well for the Rome module. So I took snips of evidence from different writers, but from different for example, emperors, and they had to try and work out from that bit of evidence, without a title, without who it was, who wrote it. So they really had to think about what they knew about the writer, which historian, which emperor they were talking about. So bits of evidence from, for example, Nero, etc. Then they had to try and remember the events in the reign. Who could this be talking about? Why would they be talking about this emperor in this certain way? And that really got them thinking, and that was actually quite a fun activity because, with all the intrigues, etc. Oh, which emperor could have possibly have done that, which worked really well as well. For Rome, I find that giving them a source booklet per emperor helps kind of make it more sectioned out for them. So they'll get a source booklet per emperor with the sources in for the 5 emperors, 1 per topic, 1 per emperor, and they're expected to bring that into each lesson. And then I do some work booklets as well, again, to help with the students that are struggling with some of the evidence, or like to make sure they've got things wrote down. I create kind of a booklet to help with scaffolding reading. So hopefully you can just about see it from some of the pictures that I've put there. So this is just a couple of examples from the booklet that I do on the victory at Actium, settlement of 27 BC, 23 BC. So the separate source booklet has the poems in Horace, Virgil, etc., etc. And then we will read the poems usually in class as a group, just to help with some of the wordings, so they can all get something from the source. And then you can see some of the questions, give examples of how Cleopatra was portrayed in the poem, why has she been portrayed this way. So it allows the ones that find the sources a little bit more difficult to access, especially the archaeology, the coins, the poems, etc. They're still getting lots out of it, but it allows the higher end students to really kind of give even more specific detail. So everybody's coming out from that lesson with something written down and something to remember. And again, with Horace Odes, and then at the top, Jupiter's prophecy, the Aeneid. Again, picking things out, discussing it as a group, and making sure that everybody's got something tangible to leave the lesson with in their work booklet. The stretch and challenge for the higher level, I give out extra bits from these sources, get them to read some extra bits from Virgil, for example, because they are often wanting to know a little bit more. So I will have some extra printed copies of extra bits of the source, just so they can go away and read a little bit more, which they often find quite useful and are interested in. Also, with the kind of teaching the archaeological facts and the evidence and things, coins, etc. Obviously, this can be quite new to a lot of students using evidence in this sort of way, and that was one of obviously the exam questions this year on the AS paper. So thinking about using artifacts, archaeological evidence, coins, etc. How can we use that in a way that we can interpret from a historical point of view? This is an example from my A2, who one of the topic areas in the Society and Culture of Athens, we look at buildings, art, architecture. So often getting images, I print them out. If you colour, I've spared no cost there with the colour. I'll get them to even draw them out themselves. That's kind of a fun activity. My drawing's absolutely shocking. So when I draw a map on the board and a boat that's bigger than an island, for example, they always like laugh about my drawings. Oh, remembering you did that map on the board with that really terrible drawing. I'm like, well, at least you remembered. So getting them to draw things out themselves is a way of remembering. Mind maps, key facts about images, how it can be used as evidence, limitations. Again, something that they can remember, something that's maybe sticks in the mind a little bit more. And that often I found works quite well because they've actually had to think about it. They still love cutting and sticking even at this age. They find it a bit of relief to think, oh, the scissors are out. So it's I highly recommend doing some cutting and sticking, even though they are A-level students. And again, color coding. So again, this is an example of color coding, annotating, for example, some of the stuff that we do. So in second year, especially with the Athens module, we do reading of plays. So one of the things that I do is we give out the plays, and then they will have a color coding system. So as you can see there, one of the students has color coded anything to do about how religion is important, how it's portrayed, view of themselves and others, the view and role of women in the play. And then we will read it and we'll discuss it, and they'll color code it. And then, as you can see, been annotated. And then we use summary tables then to pull all that together. So they've got a concise quote bank, really. So if they're wanting to think about, well, how's religion used in plays, to then they've got kind of like all that there as well. Again, summary tables are useful. I'm just going to try and share something else with you, which hopefully will come up. I'm not very good at this sharing business. One moment. Let me just share the screen. I don't think I can do it. Lots of for example, oh, let me go back. Terrible. Ah, there we go. Okay. So this is an example of one of the like kind of tables that we use. So for each of the Greece module in AS, I give them out a sheet per kind of time span, and then they are to fill these out at the end of each time span. I give it out in A3. They can decide to do however they want, but it's again something structured for the students to get out of everything from the module, that the topic that we've just done. So the level of threat from the Persians between these years. So we kind of like decide whether you're a serious threat, moderate threat, or a no threat. Roles played by others. So they've got to think about the evaluation, the analysis of this particular area, and then where we can find some evidence to support our views. So again, it's just pulling everything together, and I find those useful at the end of each topic, because then I say, okay, get out your evaluation tables. Let's look at this particular question. Or if we're doing some past paper questions, they can get those out and they can pull out everything that they've kind of got from the lessons through that as well. Yeah, that's basically Let me just see if I can. That's that's basically it. That's my kind of take on how to teach sources. I hope some of that was useful, and if you've got any questions, then look at that perfect time, and I aimed for 1/4 past with 5 minutes for questioning. So my lesson or whatever is proved timely. James.
I'm just interested. Thank you. I really enjoyed that, Emma, as I knew I would.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
just interested in your switch, obviously, away from the AS model.
Yeah.
Because I know yours is about the biggest center in the country, I think. In fact, it definitely is the biggest center in the country offering AS. So slightly setting aside that AS, how's that going to impact, do you think, on take up for A level? Do you think, and ancient history more generally, are you going to get more kids just plumping for the, all the way through? They're
Mm,
starting on 3, so it's not like they're going to start on 4 and drop 1.
yeah.
How do you think that's going to work for you for ancient history?
Well, I was a little bit apprehensive, thinking, am I going to be like the 4th subject, if you will? Have they just picked ancient history because it's, they like history and it looks quite good to have it on their UCAS application, for example, that they've done a core subject. I've spoken to our enrolment team, and apparently the numbers that have applied and as ancient history as one of their 3 A levels is roughly about 95% of what I've had before. So I'm hoping they convert to actual enrolment. So at the moment, I haven't really hemorrhaged many students choosing ancient history as their subject.
So potentially that means that, if that means that, I don't know, 80 to 85 students
Yeah,
taking it as one of their 3,
yeah.
then the number that you would have taking the A level at the end is going to be a lot higher than you've currently got.
Yes, so that means at the minute, obviously, my groups at AS are 4, which then they put into 2 in second year. So if that's the case, then I'm going to have more A2. So I'll have potentially, maybe, depending how they decide to divide it up, maybe 3 or 4 A2 groups. I know this for my timetable for next year. Because I've got a big influx of AS this year, they've timetabled 3 A2 groups for next year. So I've got, rather than 2, because those that have like signed up for it to be there for their 3rd subject, if you will, I've got 3 groups.
That's great. Congratulations.
No,
Obviously,
thank you.
got a good reputation out there and everything.
Thank you, James. Anyone else got any questions about delivering anything? I can help any way I can.
Sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but if I could just jump in. You've
Yep.
got some amazing looking resources and some really good ideas that I'm anxious to try out. My question is really quite a boring housekeeping one. How do the students keep that information organized? You mentioned that, oh, when we're moving on to an essay, I'll tell them to get these things out. Where are they getting them out from? Do you have any tips or advice on that front?
I have quite high expectations of my students. So when the first lesson, when they come, I tell them there's a set kind of resources that they need. So I tell them all. They've all been, and I've told them this week because they've started their A2 stuff. And I said, next lesson, this is what I want to see. And they more or less do it. So I asked them all to have a folder. They've got to bring a folder with them. If they want dividers, so a divider 1 per time span, if you will, so they can put all the sheets behind it. And even if it's a really cheap set, just a pack of highlighters. I do keep some highlighters in my room for those that forget them. So key thing, paper, pen, obviously, a folder for specifically for ancient history. So I get them to have one for, we start off with Greece, and then that when we finish Greece, that gets left at home, and then a new folder comes so they can start again with all the Rome stuff, dividers, and a pack of highlighters. So I'd by the 2nd, 3rd week, they are automatic, every lesson as they walk in, I'll just say to them, highlighters out, source booklet out. That's the first thing I say to them as they walk. Morning, obviously, and hello, how are you? But apart from that, it'll be, okay, everyone, good morning, everyone. Have a seat. Can you get your highlighters out? Can you get your source booklet out? Or can you get those out in the work booklet we were starting on last lesson? So it's a kind of expectation that every time they come into my classroom, that is what that we will be using, and they bring it, and obviously I get them to put the names on it, so if they do leave it behind, I know who to give it back to. But I would say 9 times out of 10 everybody brings what they need. And I know it sounds like quite ambitious, but and I have a couple of spares in the classroom just in case they have forgotten them. But I think if you start off with the expectation that this is what you want them to bring every lesson, and this is what I expect from you to have, I think if you start with that, then it just becomes kind of a natural thing to have that with them.
And does the school provide the folders and the highlighters, or is that just something they're expected to source on their own?
No, they had to buy them on their own, but I do say to them, if anybody has, you don't have to tell me out in the classroom, but if there are any problems, just stay behind at the end. And there has been some students in the past where they've saying, I can't afford folders and I can't afford whatever. So there is a kind of like for student stuff, or if you will, like leftover folders that have been left behind, I will then go and give them a folder or get some highlighters for them. So I make sure everybody's equipped. Basically, nobody's going to be without.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody got anything else they want to ask?
Conscious of the time, I wonder whether
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
going to end. I believe you now have a break until 11:30 and then move over to the GCSE call. So what I'll do is let me just end the recording quickly first. So what I'll do is I'm going to probably